Welcome to Artificial Insights, the podcast where we learn to build AI people need and use by interviewing product leaders who have launched AI products. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and today I'm joined by Anwar Jeffrey, co-founder and CTO of Glowstick, which is a venture-backed company that he founded over 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, he went through Entrepreneur First, an accelerator that helps entrepreneurs launch their companies, and I met him around 7 years ago at Bonfire, a company that does public procurement and got acquired for $100 million after a Series A. I think the question on everybody's mind is, Anwar, are you an AI?
Am I? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Although I'd like to build an automated version of myself one day as
Anwar
an
AI?
assistant and AI for myself. I don't think anybody else in the world needs that. But
Send us do
yeah,
your interviews for you. And I
that
had an interesting, I guess, discussion recently with someone else who I was hoping to interview, and I will be on Thursday. And I said to them, talk about your AI product at this company, because I know that they've worked on it. And they said, oh, that wasn't really AI. It was just data-driven decisions. And I was like, there's a big perspective in there of AI to not AI. So what does AI mean to you?
what does AI mean to me? It's funny because I came into this not even wanting to build an AI company at all. Right. One of my biggest things was I'm never going to build an AI company because
Just happened by accident?
it just happened to be the right solution for the problem at hand. That's what ended up happening. So what does AI really mean to me? I mean, I think like the couple of layers that I've thought through, but I guess we use what is now referred to as traditional AI. Just LLMs have become a thing. So neural nets and everything in between, or everything neural net and prior, I suppose, is now
So
considered traditional.
you're making a distinction between LLMs, probably generative LLMs, and then everything before.
Everything before. So I think in my perspective, we teach a model something and it essentially takes over and automates that process for you or delivers the outcome that you want. If anything, I just some sort of like smart automation. I say it's a high level of automation in a sense with more features, aka like attributes, like characteristics or data points. I haven't really thought about like what does AI mean to me. I just know that I'm running an AI company, which is the weirdest thing. So,
So, so something like if you can automate a decision without having to pre-decide it yourself.
that's true. Yeah, there's a lot in there.
Yes.
I'd say I get the whole you don't have to pre-decide it yourself aspect, but it's more like if you could teach it how you are doing it. I think that was the key thing, or how to do it, and it goes on and it uses that as the basis to go forth and do it for you, essentially.
So
Right?
like a good intern.
Yeah, but at scale, who could go through a hell of a lot more data than a human can, right? But to just I'm like, it's almost like automation on steroids. That's how I think about it. Whereas LLMs have changed that paradigm. But I mean, at the end of the day, still automation on steroids. You just ask it questions and it's got a bunch of data to go off of, right? You could have gone off
Yeah.
and read all that data in like a couple of lifetimes and good luck trying to like find it, or you know what I mean? But it's essentially like human automation in terms of like its ability to ingest like structure and retrieve at scale, right?
Okay. Maybe we can get back to that one later, because you said something about Glowstick, where you're at now,
Yeah,
that you built an AI product because it was the right tool for the job.
exactly.
What did you build and what made it the right tool?
So Glowstick is a RevOps assistant. for post-sales teams, right? That essentially helps them identify, cross-sell opportunities, expansion opportunities, and just run sales playbooks or leading indicators for those sales playbooks from calls that people in the organization are having with their customers. Now, why this care about is, think about it this way. You've got two B2B SaaS companies, let's say, right? Let's say you are selling, or Microsoft is selling Teams to you, right? There's 6 people at Microsoft that handle your account, potentially, your Teams
That I'm
account
going to talk to
that you're going to talk to.
as a buyer. Yeah.
CS, support, your account manager who handles the actual contract negotiations, right? The customer success manager handles the renewal bit, like making sure that you're successful in your renewing, right? So one thing that everybody knows, and we've all experienced this, is you talk to every one of these different people, they're asking you the same questions, you're repeating yourself, right? I'm not picking on Microsoft at all. I'm just using them as an example here.
I've even done this at my Toyota garage,
Yeah,
and they have no excuse. There's like 10 people there.
exactly. So you have this breakdown of context about a customer within that pod, even if it's 6 people just dedicated to an account, because all those people also have 20 to 100 other accounts that they're also managing, right? So most of the information is sort of like transferred because some critical event is about to happen. Like you're about to do a quarterly check-in, right? And now as an account manager, I'm doing 20 and then over the next 2 weeks, but I need to sync up with everybody and get them to give me everything they know that happened over the last quarter.
Yeah.
And you can imagine how much falls between the cracks, right? So this is essentially the problem that we're solving. When COVID hit, everybody switched to recording videos and meetings. So we started ingesting all those calls and started essentially identifying all these signals that point to expansion opportunities, churn risk, cross-sell opportunities, like what are the customers asking for? What don't they like about certain features that the customer, that they're about the product? What do they need to be supported more? Right. What are the intentions or goals over the next year, or next year kind of thing? Right. And
So
bringing
product and
those
usage questions.
exactly, like it's product usage and intent or needs detection. And we map all of those to, the product that you sell essentially. And that is the cool thing that like somebody could say, hey, we're looking to do XYZ. And we could be like, hey, you've got a product that does that, but they send it to a support person who's not really in contact with, your account manager all the time. Right. So that account manager would be able to hop on Glowstick and see that like little nugget of like, oh, cool. Wait, I could potentially sell this customer this now. This product now meets their needs, because the biggest thing is timing, right?
If I ask for it right now, I want it right now.
You probably want it right now, or you're going to want it. Most expansions happen at renewal because it's easy to renew and expand, right? So
budget cycles. Yeah.
Budget cycles. So it's easy to also track that over time, essentially, in terms of like, they started talking about it 8 months ago and they've been consistent about it for the last 4 months, right? They haven't let go of it. Maybe we just need to circle back, stuff like that. So you have this like sort of like timeline of how your customer is using your product, what their needs are, how they're evolving. Because if you've got a suite of products that you're selling a customer, if I sell them features A and B, you've got a bunch of like white space, right? All that white space is a potential opportunity to sell this customer something else. The issue is,
those would
when
be
do you sell
new
them?
features, new products you could build.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As you add more features and new products, to your product, to your product line, um, all you have to figure out is like, when do I sell this? When do I discuss this? The worst thing you could do is bring up a product that the customer doesn't need at all because you're just trying to sell them something. Now you become a sales guy, right?
You want fries with that?
Exactly. It's like, no, I don't want fries with it. You only try to sell me something. So you let the customer let you know, essentially, or you have the ability now to pick up on the signals when a customer is ready to buy something. You figure out the when and the why. And you
And you
just talk
said,
about that product as opposed to some other thing that you've been asked to sell.
yeah, that brings me back to something you said about needs analysis or needs
Yes.
identification. And that sounds like the core feature of everything that you've just described. You know needs over time, you know needs from a support call. How did you detect those?
Oh man. So we have a ethos at Glowstick. Dumb AI is always our thing. Um,
Dumb AI.
yeah. So doing things as simply as possible. And it meant breaking it down into a whole bunch of things. I think the biggest thing was intent detection.
Hmm.
Right. Being able to actually identify a customer's intent and then match it to the domain, which is our customer's product. Right.
Hmm.
So
Similarity to search there then, but instead of web pages, you want products.
basically, so that's essentially what our sort of like secret, I guess, source is. Um, which is interesting. But we'll be open sourcing a bunch of like the tools that we used. I have to give a big shout out to Shred,
Mm-hmm.
who's our founding ML engineer. He used to be the chairman of Keras prior to the whole Google and TensorFlow
That I
thing.
did not know. That's very cool.
And he also published BAL, or Bayesian Active Learning Framework, and Azimuth, which are two like really cool um, repos or tools, AI tools that we've used to enable what we've been able to do. But essentially, when you talk about dumb AI, dude, it's like we didn't use any neural nets. I'm not gonna lie. Um, we kept it very simple, right? Sentiment analysis, like you name it, topic analysis, domain matching, like it became more of an aggregate of essentially how would you as a human do it,
Hmm.
right?
I like that.
That's what it was. It was the big thing that we had a challenge with was essentially how do you detect an expansion? That's how we started with this, right? Like, what does it actually mean? What does it mean to detect a need? You break down what a need looks like. You could take it from like just the phrases. You could use phrases, right? Which very easily you could start going into keywords and stuff like that.
Sure.
Which is one way of doing it, but then it sort of starts to break down because of the number of ways that humans can say that they want something.
Yeah. So you can't
Um,
just control F.
yeah, so you can't just control F and just like use keyword analysis. So we actually literally build our own sort of like intent detection, which is like pain points, goals, um, like needs, I keep saying needs, but like it's stuff like it'll be ideal if we could versus I want to,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Like you've got that sort of like nuance. It's interesting. I'm just like, I'd like to explain this more. Like, not saying the thing just yet.
We don't have to get into the technical
Yeah, into
side.
the detail. Yeah.
I think
Um,
what's really interesting though is that concept of how did a human do it and then not jumping straight to let's just throw it into an LLM.
yep. Like, don't get me wrong. We actually benchmarked throughout this whole process. We've been evaluating our process because the ability to say, how would you do it as a human? allows you to essentially create almost like a schema or flow that you could then translate into your traditional ML or even LLM. So we can do it with LLMs. Actually, we found that we could do the same thing with LLMs, right? The issue became, they still, the false positives when it was actually like, it was basically a false positive. Rates were 3 to 4 times higher with LLMs. And don't get me wrong, like we we could put in more work into like, what is it called?
Prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering, right? But like small team, there's only so much. And the thing that actually prevents us going even further in that direction was it costs more to essentially do it that way. We're talking up to 3 times to 6 times the price for one insight, right?
Wow.
So it just didn't.
3 to 4 times worse and 3 to 6 times more expensive to use an LLM.
Right. But like the 3 to 4 times worse is more because of the prompt engineering, I'd say. Like you could always do more to improve that. It's just, sure, that could also further improve price, but like it is just still cost more than us just using our own things at the end of the day.
And what you said, I think, was if you have a process that a human can follow, if you have a process that a human can follow, then you can give that to some kind of AI, whether it's dumb or whether it's an LLM.
Yeah. You could give it to some sort of AI, whether it's dumb or an LLM. Like it's crazy because as a human, when I hear I want to drive nails into the wall, right? I already think hammer.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's in my head.
It's in your head, but like we take for granted everything in that sentence. So I want to, that's you expressing a need, right? So I have to, so as a human, I understand you're expressing a need, right? So what is the need? What's the intent? Driving a nail into the wall, right? Now I've got to have all this context of what is the best tool to drive a nail into a wall. If you said, I wanted to screw a nail into the wall, I could have said screwdriver or drill or electric drill with the bit, right? But you said nail, right? So I'm thinking hammer, but I've got all that context essentially. So you've got this context of like the tools and what they are good for essentially. And then you need to know be able to pick up and identify, like identify the intent and have context of like, this thing means nail, like means hammer, nail means hammer, screw means screwdriver or like electric drill, right? But you've got to teach an AI model that.
That's a lot of context.
Right? That's the context that we're talking about. So if you think about it, like it's a similar process, right? A customer wants to do something with your tool. We understand the feature that you provide on one end, and we have to essentially teach this model how to put that all together and say, this can be met with this feature or not. None of these can like, you know what I mean? Because you also have that where customers is
maybe
like
nothing you offer.
Exactly. Whereas most like our prompts of the LLMs would still say, oh, you know what? You should just sell them this product because they hallucinate still quite a bit.
This product that you haven't made yet. There you go. Make a new one.
Oh no, it'll tell you that some product that you have can meet that demand. And it's like, no, it can't. No, it can't. But yeah.
It's not always reliable. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot in there, like topic modeling is one, right? Domain matching is one, like sentiment is one. You get in, I mean, so there's sentiment and then there's something else. I keep forgetting what the other one is. Something else. Oh, it's like similarity, like contextual similarity is another one that you need to also keep in mind.
So those are all just different signals for context.
Different signals for building the context and getting to the decision point, right? But as humans, we just do that like
Oh,
instantaneously, like it's
immediately. Yeah.
immediately, right? Like I didn't have to think about it. So like it's funny because like that's the hard part. The hard part is actually going, how do I do it as a human, and how do I teach a model to be able to do that?
Hmm. So if you had to do this process all over from scratch, what would you tell yourself to start thinking about how to approach the problem?
More funding.
Funding doesn't hurt. All right.
Um, so here's the reality of AI companies. Under capitalization is a big thing,
Hmm.
right? Like
Because of the amount of research, you mean?
the amount of research, but also like if you've got access to the data beforehand, it helps. But real world B2B SaaS data is dirty. It's
Hmm.
messy. Real world data is messy. And it takes a while to actually get something that works. And then you get it to work for one person. When you get to two, that's a different issue. You get a three, that's a different issue. Just getting to generalizability is an issue,
Yeah.
right? And then once you get into generalizability, getting humans to trust it is a different like paradigm, all in
Yeah.
its own. Um, but I mean, the different ways to do that is what we found. Like we found that like if the data is in certain places that they already live in, where they go to look for stuff, they trust it more. If you're your own solution that's telling them that XYZ, like I'm coming to my solution, to your solution to find them, they they are more skeptical of it,
Hmm. So if
right?
you say in Salesforce, for example,
If you
that
put the
this
Salesforce,
customer
they
has
trust
an
it.
upsell, yeah.
Oh, we'll trust it. But if you ask them to come to your product, they're like, yeah, this is questionable. This whole product is questionable, right?
Design is
Even the
terrible.
design is
AI must be
terrible.
terrible.
Yeah. So like you end up with like adoption issues, user trust, and it takes a while for AI companies to really scale or grow.
Hmm.
Growth is one of the biggest AI issues, but then scalability then becomes a second issue now, right? Generalizability and scalability become
Yeah.
big issues. So with that in mind, being highly capitalized, running a lean team is one of the most important things. And the market right now, the reality of it is you're either raising a ton of money for something that's like a long shot, or you're raising like very little in a sense. But very
Hmm.
few people are raising too little now, if you think about it, because you're not sure when you're going to get your next like raise, or if your
Hmm.
growth is going to matter, especially in AI. In AI, it's more like, dude, bootstrap it for as long as you can, right? Prove it. Like it might take you a while, but try to prove it. And then go and raise knowing that it works, right? Knowing that you figured out where to put the data, how people are going to consume it. But like bootstrapping now for any company is more important, is super important. Or just raise a ton of money towards it. Like,
That'd be nice.
and that's why you see a lot of AI companies raising a ton of money for what they're doing, because it takes a long time to
Yeah.
get to the point where it's generalizable, it scales, and users are willing to use it
Hmm.
and trust it.
So I think you mentioned what generalizability was before, which was being able to handle different customers' data, for
Yep.
example. But what would you say scalability was, and that challenge is there?
Gaming. So like generalizability is the model being able to consume and utilize different customers' data. scalability is actually being able to serve all those customers.
Okay. So then load on the system, like even.
That's more like load on the system. That's more like how do you architect your models and AI and pipelines in order to get them to essentially handle scale. Like, don't get me wrong, that's not a hard. It's not that it's hard. It's more when you're building early days for 1, 2, 3, 4 customers. It's a very different thing from your first 5 to like your first 25 to your first 100,
Hmm.
right? But it's been proven. Like the design patterns and architectures that are proven that work.
True.
It's
True.
just you just have to keep those in mind. But then you end up with interesting challenges from generalizability, right?
Hmm.
Like getting the data in, training, testing,
And doing
QA,
that at scale.
doing that at scale.
Hmm.
That's where it starts getting tricky, essentially, like keeping your models performant at scale,
Hmm.
right? You could serve, but
Mm-hmm.
how do you keep your models performant at scale?
Hmm. So then would you say you're ready to hit the gas when you figured out generalizability with 3, 5 customers, or?
I think for us, it was more like when we're at the 3 mark, we realized that there was not necessarily, we saw leading indicators of generalizability. That's
Hmm.
how I'd put it. So those similarities, even though these customers are in different domains,
Wow.
like different industries,
Yeah, that's
we could
cool.
see that, okay, cool. There's certain points where it falls over and to the part where it just works. Right. Um, and then it becomes a lot of like, I don't know, I was going to say tuning, but tuning is actually a term, or fine tuning is a term in AI/ML, which is not the right word. But it's more iteration.
Tweaking.
Yeah, it's more like iteration, right? Like
Okay.
you try a lot of things. We tried a lot of things based on what we're seeing in order to try to improve um, the generalizability of the solution. And I mean, it worked. So like,
Mhm.
was it,
Mhm.
is it the most generalizable tool just yet? More customers, more industries still exist. Our customers are constantly rolling out new product offerings. Every time they roll out a new product offering, that changes the way that the model behaves or their
True. You
model
kind of have
behaves.
scale with just one customer, or
Exactly.
you could.
Um, custom businesses also change pricing models and the way they re-architect the plans. Now that's addictive.
So keep it up with your customers. Yeah.
Right? They change names of products. Like you
Mm.
end up with some very interesting, and this is the thing around like the scalability too, because these are business, our customers and their business are always evolving.
Yeah.
So even your first 10, just keeping them, like serving them is a whole endeavor in itself, right? Like
Mm.
you have the same challenges as onboarding a new customer.
Maybe even harder, because if you have a customer that has a product named salt and they change it to pepper, you got to know that those are the same thing.
Exactly. Exactly. And then don't get me like into the whole like Salesforce integration and what's happening in the data. Data is always changing. Fields are changing. How do you identify those changes? There's a whole
Hmm.
different world in there that we had to build our own tools that could essentially detect changes in fields that were required, like whether or not they're being dropped or changed, and discuss and literally ping the Salesforce admin who made the changes and ask them
Oh,
what the
wow.
new field is so
Yeah.
that we could update that.
So anytime you're dealing with customer data, you need to have a process for dealing with changes in customer data,
Exactly. Because
even just
you
Salesforce integration.
even just a Salesforce integration, right? And Salesforce is messy. That's what I'm talking about. Like
Mm.
data is messy. So like when you talk about enriching customer data, like, you know, you'd have, let's say something as simple as a customer's ARR that they're paying. Because maybe you want to know whether or not their company or the customer is like essentially like, I want to say timed out. Maybe that's the term. I forgot what the phrase is. Essentially, like, have they spent as much as they can on your product?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Or is there more capacity? Do they have more capacity? And are they showing signs of being able to expand more? So what's the
Mm.
historical, what's in over time, how have they expanded and stuff like that? So you want to go back and look at previous deals, what those deals were closing for, how frequent those were, right? You're enriching all of this, you're using all this data to help make better predictions of, is this customer actually ready to expand, right? Or have they just tapped out and you can't sell them anything anymore because over the last 4 years, that was just a theme. Even though they want stuff, you haven't sold them anything over the last 4 years. There's no appetite. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so let's say the field for ARR, it can change from, this year, the field was some other field. Today, they've created a whole new field and the ARR is calculated a different way or for some weird reason, or there's a different calculation or it's broken up into four. You
Mm.
know what I mean? Like these are things that we saw where like one ARR field is like, okay, cool. Now we want to attribute ARR per feature that they have.
So even just how they do the bookkeeping changes everything.
Exactly. That changes everything.
Wow.
So this model that's looking for ARR now have to take into account ARR per product.
And
So
what
you
was
end up in
your
those like interesting.
what was your process for dealing with that? And did you know that that was going to happen when you went in?
Dude, we're a startup. You don't know half the shit that you're walking into.
Maybe none of it, really.
Like, which is honestly, this is why being naive helps as well. Because if you knew, I don't think most people would do it. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like,
Yep. It's good entrepreneurial
it's
advice.
it wants to be naive and just take things as they come. Really, that's what the reality of it is. Like, you're only dealing with the things that are coming up and are important to your customers that you need. There's always many fires burning, right? There's always smoke bellowing from somewhere. It's just which fire do you put out and in what order is what keeps you going, essentially. Um, as long as the building doesn't burn down, that's the goal, right?
Mm. What's been the most helpful advice for you to putting out the right fire?
The most helpful advice for putting out the right fire, interestingly, because I came from an engineering background, so you see all the bugs. This is the issue,
Mm-mm.
right?
Yep.
As on the technical team, you see all the bugs. Um, and I think a lot of us engineers love the idea of building something perfect, bug free, well tested. There's just squeaky clean.
Code looks nice.
Like code looks nice. Like we all have this sort of like notion in our heads, but the reality is we all know that there's always going to be technical depths. Uh, so like the best advice that it's just, I lean heavily on customer value.
Mm.
That's what
Meaning
the
what's
biggest thing
valuable
is.
to the customer.
Like yeah, like how bad is it for the customer and the customer's experience? How does it affect adoption? How does it affect utilization? Like that's the most important thing, right? For me, like, do the users see this? right? How affected are they by this? That's what I prioritize more. Especially now at these like early stages when you're trying to really grow your product, right? And make it very intuitive for your users to use and build trust. Like if, like, yeah, all the scalability issues, they don't see those. You know what I mean? Like they don't see those. That's what the reality of it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like that's happening behind the scenes. We're seeing those. Um, the worst case is like if your scalability issues mean, oh, now the product is down, but now they're affected by it, then scalability becomes a thing, right? But at the end of the day, it's just what's affecting the user the most, and and how can you deliver more value to the user within a short period of time, or within like more. For us, it's more like within a week was always a goal.
Hmm.
Every week, something like we had to deliver something that was beneficial to our users.
And I think that brings me to the question of how did you tell what actually did bring your customers the most value?
That's where building strong relationships with like champions comes into place, and identifying who the super users are at each organization. And I know people always talk about champions and super users, but you also want the people that are really lagging and don't want to talk to you.
Why?
Because here's the reality with any solution, right? Like, especially B2B SaaS, I'd say it usually involves a lot of change management
Mm.
for a lot of these tools, right? So your best top two performing individuals will be outliers. You'll have a champion and like another super user, right? Let's say everybody else is scattered in between, and then you've got people that haven't adopted it or just haven't come to it. No matter how much, let's say, your buyer is harping on them to use it, right?
Mm.
And it's especially the case when the buyer's issues that your solution solves for are not necessarily the users.
Mm. So when you're B2B,
They've got
you
others.
can sell something, but they might not need to use it.
They might not. The users might. It's not might not need, but just don't want to
Mm.
use it,
Mm. So you're
right?
going after those people who are laggards, not just super users, because you want to know,
Exactly.
what do you want to know?
You want to know, like, why are they using it and how can we make it better? Like, where are they spending the time? Where else are they spending the time? Right? Because it's funny because a buyer's needs most important problems are not the user's most important problems, right? And essentially the buyer is asking them to do homework sometimes, or asking them to do more work that they're like, you have got other stuff that I got to do, right? But you need this or that, right? You need transparency on pipeline, for example, right?
Yeah.
As a buyer, but as the user, I'm trying to figure out which accounts to move into pipeline. I'm trying to have different conversations. I have deals that I haven't put in Salesforce yet that are sort of like in a notepad that I'm not willing to put into Salesforce till they're actually a thing,
Mm.
right?
Yep. I did want to ask you a question related to talking to people that aren't necessarily your champions. You've told me a bit about the journey of finding that the way that the B2B SaaS market has evolved, uh, probably during COVID, but the way that the B2B SaaS market has evolved towards rip and replace, I think you called it. So no longer people don't want 100 tools, they want a big tool. And can you just briefly describe that journey of discovery?
So think about it this way. You have incumbents, like you've got the big companies in every space, right? Like the leaders in every space. There's been this overwhelming rise of we're going to do the same thing, but cheaper than incumbents,
Mm.
right? So the issue with that though is like, we've got all these incumbents coming in and, charging a tenth of the price. You're affecting the market value now, right? And the big companies are trying to essentially validate the price point
Hmm.
and keep that price point in check.
So when you say
So
affecting
yeah,
the value of the market, you mean?
I'm talking about like TAM, the actual market value kind of thing. Because now what you're saying is we've gone from this could be worth 2.5 billion to this is worth 250 million
By cutting the price by 8 to 10,
by
well, I
cutting
guess
the price.
by cutting the price to 10%, you cut
Exactly.
the market to 10%.
Exactly. So
Hmm.
the market shrinks when people drive down the cost of, and that's what the reality of sort of like competition creates, right? Better
Yeah.
prices. It's just typical, standard economics. Like there's only so much demand and the supply is increasing. So prices are going to drop. It's simple. Um, so the idea of like the rip and replace is essentially everybody's trying to rip and replace each other,
Hmm.
right? Because I am doing it for a tenth of the price. A lot of us have got feature parity. Price becomes the topic of conversation,
Hmm.
right?
So why
And
pay
now
more
what
for the
you're
same?
running is why pay more for the same? So now all these companies are identifying who is using which competitor's product and trying to rip out that competitor and replace them.
Hmm. So
That's
then
what the
they,
game starts. That's what the game becomes, right? So we essentially help our customers also run these rip and replace campaigns or playbooks, essentially, where we can detect, a customer saying, "Hey, you know, we sell. Let's say our customer sells 8 features. One of the competitors is mentioned on a call for feature D, essentially, and the renewal date for that feature is 9 months away. We let the AM know that you could turn on the trial in 6 months' time and try to run this, rip and replace campaign.
hmm.
Let them try your product and try to swing them over better price, right? And the benefit there is now you're trying to consolidate that customer to you for a better price, as opposed to, well, your competitors are trying to do the same thing, where they're trying to consolidate your customer onto them for a better price. So as companies in the market were trying to like free up budgets, this became one of the biggest things that we started seeing happening, right? Where, you know, budget cuts were happening, everybody was scrutinizing the tools. The idea of using tools that had some feature parity or similar offerings, you had to consolidate onto one, right? So it became a game of actually ripping out ripping out your competitor and being the one that the customer being the tool that that the customer stays on.
So it sounds like the two summaries would be expand and try to get other people in the company on yours, and also really to fight an active battle, know what's going on with your competitor, and then get there first.
And at the customer, well, it's not even like get there first, sure, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be the only one there. It's more like you have to do a lot of discovery about your customer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you need to understand that true stack. You need to understand who's using what, where. And this is where the needs stuff comes into play quite a lot more, right? Like what needs have been met by what tool you're using, right? It's a lot of discovery, a lot of like relationship building so that people can actually tell you when they're renewing on other solutions. Like it could be interesting. Like, why are you asking me when am I renewing on, Google G Suite? That's a weird thing to ask me, right? But let's say you're like
No reason.
a meeting booking tool, for example. Right? It's like, okay, I guess maybe for your integration with Google Calendar, I don't know. But it's really because you want to try and replace G Suite. You've got a whole other offering, and your customer probably doesn't even know it yet,
Hmm.
right? So there's also a lot of education too. but you can only educate your customer, your buyer, but they're not always the buyer of that other solution. That's the other thing that I'm pointing out. So that's where your champion comes into play, who can then intro you to somebody else, to the other buyer, and you could potentially bring them into like your product offering. Yeah.
So internal
So
networking as well at a customer.
yeah, it's a lot of internal networking and like just relationship building.
Okay. But yeah, the thing I heard you say too was doing needs discovery, not just use case discovery. So I got an example with one company I've seen where they have a competitor and the competitor only has basically one feature. And they have a feature that's like it, but this competitor's feature is just better. And so now that competitor is going around and saying, use our product instead because we have this one really killer feature. And then the really simple thing would be to say, okay, let's just replicate that feature. But then why are people buying that feature? What are they doing with it? Is that more important to ask, or is replicating the feature good enough?
Better does not mean that you're going to be the product that solves. There are a lot of products out there that are actually the worst in their segment, but the leading in their segments. I'm not going to name any names, but like better is not one of those. It's not one of those measures of just like, because we're better, people will buy, right? And then there's relationship building, right? And this is what's interesting because that's what the customer success teams or CSMs do, right? The customer has to see a history of, we can be successful with you, and your tool helps us do what we need to do with as little pain as possible. Right? Better. You can come and talk about better all day. A lot of people aren't going to sell on being better. Like, tell me why I'm better. It becomes why you're better. And it's like, yeah, but I could already do that. I get that it's easier, but I could do it.
Not
right?
better enough.
Because what you're asking me to do, if I switch to you, is essentially upend all of my team and all that data and move it over to your better solution. Like, you can't be marginally better. You have to literally be 10 times better.
Just to win on better.
Just to win on better. So like, if you're creating feature parity and just copying, like, you're marginally better. It's not worth it.
And instead of feature parity, you'd focus more on relationships and trust.
It's relationships, trust, and success. Like a success track, like history of success.
Fair enough. It's business. So trust means a history of success.
The history of success.
Well, I only have one more question for you, which is, what do you see as the future of AI?
What do I see the future of AI?
Is it going to get less dumb? I'm just kidding.
I think interestingly, the future of AI is actually building dumb AI in an interesting way. Dumb AI makes it to production faster. And I'm using dumb loosely, but simple, if you can break it down into simple components, it makes it to production easier. The more complicated your AI solution is, the longer it takes to actually make it to production. So like, if you want to make it to production, and something that's scalable, something that's maintainable, make it simple. Make it dumb. Solve the problem. Don't build the coolest thing. You know what I mean? Like, we could have just, because I remember I wanted to use neural nets. I was like, oh, we could use neural nets to do all of this. And Fred's like, no.
Thank you, Fred.
He's like, oh no. Oh no. So like, yeah, thank you, Frank. It's the more I've seen this over and over again in a lot of founders where I listen to, you know, and then this is probably a controversial take, but like opinion. But I listen to a lot of founders talk about what they want to build and how they're going to do it. I'm just like, doesn't have to be that smart. You're overcomplicating it. Um, and that's what's going to cost you time.
Yeah.
Time to
Yeah.
market is one of your biggest things, because of how long it takes to actually get AI across the line. And that's why funds like um, Ex, Ex Machina, I think is what it's called, Ex Machina in Montreal exist. They're literally funds that buy IP of AI companies that didn't make it all the way at scale to scale.
Hmm.
Right.
Because their time to
And they
market was too
take the
slow.
time and funding. Yeah. And because they understand that it takes a while. So they find the funding to essentially scale those and give them the legs that they need in order to keep going.
Hmm.
But it
So don't
takes
do that.
time.
Don't do that if you don't have to. Go for dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. But like people don't want to hear that.
No.
Right. Like if I told people what we used to do this, it doesn't seem cool.
Hmm.
But that's why it's cool. It's because it works.
It works and
And
it
like
does something
we're not
that needs doing.
exactly like I get wanting to build the shiniest thing and use the newest, like coolest technology. Like, don't get me wrong. I understand that need. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you need to get paid so you can actually continue going that route.
Thanks for listening. I made this podcast because I want to be the person at the city gate to talk to every person coming in and out doing great things with AI and find out what and why, and then share the learnings with everyone else. It would mean a lot if you could share the episode with someone that you think would like it. And if you know someone who would be a great person for me to talk to, let me know. Please reach out to me at Daniel Maneri on LinkedIn or shoot an email to daniel@maneri.house, which is Daniel@MANARY.HAUS. Thanks for listening.